Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jacob Ellis. I'm the Student Government Association president here at Northwestern State, and thank you for joining us today as we recognize and pay tribute to those among us who have been part of the United States military, our veterans, active duty service members, guardsmen, and reservists. It is your service and sacrifice that has kept our country safe and free. I ask that you all please rise as you are able for the singing of the national anthem by Juliana Handy, adjunct professor of music, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held by the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Please join me in welcoming the 19th president of Northwestern State University, Dr. Chris Maggio.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special program. First and foremost, I'd like to begin today by recognizing all among us who have been a part of the U.S. military. It's your service and sacrifice that has kept our country safe and free. As you're able, would you please stand to be recognized, those who have served in the U.S. military? And now I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Commander SEAL Erin Johnson, U.S. Navy retired. Erin served from October 1990 to January 2010. Lieutenant Commander Erin Johnson is a native of Lebanon, Oregon. He enlisted in the Navy in 1990 and graduated from Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Class 178. He later graduated from Old Dominion University and holds a Bachelor of Science in International Business. While enlisted, Johnson's operational assignments include 2 tours at SEAL Team 3. Additionally, he attended Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, where he studied the Arabic language. Johnson was commissioned in 1997 and filled operational roles in SEAL Team 8, SEAL Team 10, and SEAL Team 2. His staff assignments included duty as the operations officer at Naval Special Warfare Unit 3 and officer in charge of Naval Special Warfare Detachment South. Please join me in welcoming Erin Johnson, who will introduce our special guest today. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you.
Good afternoon. It's my honor today to introduce our guest speaker, Miss Karen Vaughn. Karen Vaughn is the mother of fallen U.S. Navy SEAL Erin Carson Vaughn. On August 6th of 2011, Erin was killed in action in the Tangai River province of Afghanistan when a chopper, call sign Extortion 17, carrying 30 Americans was shot from the sky while rushing into battle. Losing Erin changed everything and launched Karen on a brand new path. Over the past 8 years, Karen has emerged on the national scene as a powerful spokeswoman for not only our defenders still fighting on foreign soil and securing peace across the globe, but also as an advocate for better, stronger, more resilient America. Carrying on Erin's legacy has brought this Gold Star mother through the halls of Congress and in multiple national press conferences. As a cultural and political analyst, Karen has written for several of our nation's leading news outlets, with many of her articles going viral. She's a regular guest on multiple national news programs and is interviewed with well over 100 national and local radio shows. Karen has been featured on large stages across the country as a keynote speaker, including primetime guest speaker position during opening night of the 2016 Republican National Convention. Karen is also the best-selling author of World Changer, A Mother's Story, and serves as an advocate and national speaker for American Warrior Initiative Freedom Tour. She also serves with the nonprofit her family began in honor and memory of her son, Operation 300. A mother of 3 and grandmother of 6, she has been married to Billy Vaughn for 39 years and still believes her greatest accomplishment on earth was raising her 3 children, Erin, Tara, and Anna. Would you join me in welcoming Miss Karen Vaughn?
Thank you so much. God bless you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak to you today. And thank you for taking time out of your schedules to just come and hear me. Is it okay if I just walk up here, or do you guys need me back there in the lights? Because I like to be able to see people's faces. Before we get started, if you wouldn't mind, the people who stood up and said that they've served in the United States military, if you would stand up one more time and just let me look in your face while I'm about to say what I'm about to say, I would really appreciate it. I want to say to you that there is not a group of people on the entire planet that I have more love, honor, and respect for than those of you who have protected and defended my freedom, and I thank God for each of you. Thank you very much. All the way back to our founders, the people of this country have understood that freedom was never, is never, and will never be free, that freedom has a cost. And I was going to say, if you'll go ahead and throw up that first slide, we're going to start there. Here's the thing. I travel all over the country trying to make people understand if you haven't paid for the cost of freedom by like those of you who have served. Let me ask one more question. Any others of you in this room have family members who've served in the military? If you'd raise your hand. Yeah, oh my gosh, see, the whole room, you know, you people know. And so I want you to know that this is what I make the mission of my life, is to share the story of freedom and freedom's cost with civilians across this country. And the illustration that I use routinely is this. I take my wedding ring. Now, you guys are going to find out that I don't take myself too seriously, so just bear with me while I do this. But here's my wedding ring, and oh my gosh, my fingers are swollen. You girls know how hard it is to get one off when you're like that. But okay, this ring, I got married when I was 18 years old. Okay, ladies, do you see this shiny? I didn't get this ring when I was 18. I got this ring after doing 25 years in my marriage of 39 years now. And I got to tell you something. People don't do 25 years for murder, and I did it for love. So I thought I deserved the shiny ring, you know, after 25. So my husband said, "You go ahead, go buy what you want, right? You've definitely earned it." He knows that I've earned it. Girls, don't look at anybody beside you. He knew, so he said, you know, go out and pick out what you want. And we set some parameters on what I could spend, but I found a really good deal. I found it on sale, and I got this ring. And at 25 years, I got this for my 25th wedding anniversary. Now, the thing about this ring is, I will pass this ring on to my favorite daughter, and you all know we've got one. I'll give this ring to my favorite daughter one day when I get old and I know it's time to pass it on. And then my daughter will pick her favorite daughter, And she'll give the ring to that child, and she'll pass it on. Because why? Because we know what the value of this ring was. It's Mom and Dad's 25th wedding anniversary ring. You know, Mom wore it with pride. She loved this ring. She took care of it. And so she'll take care of it. She'll treat it like the treasure it is, right? Everybody following me here? And then she'll pass that treasure to the next generation because she knows the value of this treasure. And then the next generation will understand the value of this treasure because Mom's going to teach it to them, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? And then when you get a ring from your grandmother or your great-grandmother, what are you going to do? You're going to treat that like a treasure, right? Because you know what it meant to somebody. You know that people before you paid for it. They understand the cost of it, and you understand it because they explained it to the next generation. So here we sit in a nation full of people who every day get to experience the greatest gift ever known to mankind: freedom. Yet, very few people feel a personal obligation to teach the next to value that gift enough to teach the next generation what that gift cost, what it means, what its significance is. My great-great-great-grandchild will never know that I got this for my 25th wedding anniversary and that my husband had to pay a lot of money for it unless generation after generation someone tells them, right? So that's what I try to do across the country is I try to make sure that everybody in this country knows what freedom costs. And the reason so few people know what it cost is because very few of us had to buy it. Very few of us had to purchase it. And if you'll put that next slide up, I'm going to show you what freedom cost me. That's Erin Vaughn. Erin Vaughn was the funniest person you would ever know in your life. You guys would have loved him. I can tell you that because everyone who ever knew him loved him. Said he was the greatest man they ever knew. His commanders, you'll appreciate this, his commanders, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me here, and thank you, Retha, for everything, and Lisa for connecting me. But his commanders, and you'll appreciate this, said that Erin was a fearless leader headed to the top. One of them said, if you gave me 5 men like Erin, I could conquer the world. You've known men like that. On and on. But you know what the greatest thing ever said about Erin was? And this is the greatest thing I'll ever tell you about Erin Vaughn. His teammates, his SEAL teammates. He was a member of SEAL Team 6. And his teammates said to us over and over again phrases like this: Erin was a light for Christ in a dark world. The most important thing I'll ever tell you about Erin, and it doesn't matter what campus I'm on, if I'm talking in public schools across the country or colleges or to business professionals, this is just his story. I'm not trying to convince you to be a Christian or anything else. I'm telling you that boy's story. He had a profound faith in Jesus, and because of that, I know that even though he drew his last breath 7,000 miles away from all of us who loved him, he took it in the arms of the one who loved him more than any of us could have, and he went home. And that's what gives me the strength to go on and do what I do now, because I know that one day I'm going to be with him again. But you would have loved this kid. He had a hilarious sense of humor. I don't know if any of you guys were like this, but he was the kid who, as soon as he turned 16 years old and had a license, he bought one of those fake arms, you know, that hung out of his trunk. Did you have one? I mean, this kid, even when he was a member of SEAL Team 6, I kid you not, he would lay in the shrubs at golf courses with air horns. I mean, this is just who he was. He just loved to have a good time. He loved to rag people. He loved to give people a hard time. Erin was the kind of guy that if he had $10 and you had none, you both had $5. Makes sense? It was just, what was his was yours. And he lived that way with every bit of his life. He was like that. He was hilariously witty. I never will forget, and I'm going to explain this in just a minute, but I never will forget when he came home from Afghanistan one time during a post-deployment retreat. He was at our house, and we were having a late night conversation, and I said, son, you know, I told you he was a believer, you know, and he always told people about his faith. I mean, it was just a big part of his life. But he's home, and he says, and we're having this late night talk. We would sit up late at night and talk to each other when everybody else went to bed. We did that the last night we were together on earth. We had the very same conversation until 2:30 or 3 in the morning. And I remember one night I said, son, you know, I know that, you know, clearly you were meant to be a Navy SEAL, and clearly that's what you were created to be, and I know you're doing exactly what you were made to do, but I'm so confused because I always felt like God was telling me that you were going to be a great missionary one day. And he said immediately, well, maybe you just misunderstood him, and he said I was going to be a great mercenary. That's who he was. I mean, it came out just like that all the time. He was amazing. But here's the thing, and I'm not going to take you through the whole story, but Erin overcame ridiculous odds to live his dream. He knew what he was created for. He knew from childhood up, from 8 years old, he would tell anyone who'd listen to him that one day he was going to be a Navy SEAL. I don't know if you were that way, but I've met so many people who said when they were going to do special forces or some sort of work like that, they knew it from childhood up, or any type of service. They knew from childhood up that they'd been given like a warrior spirit, a watchdog spirit, the one who watches over the rest of us. And all of us don't have to be that person, but there's those people among us, and we know it. And they're kind of born that way. And so he has this dream his whole life of what he's going to do, and every single decision he made was based on living out that dream. Does that make sense? He wouldn't get in trouble because it could stop him from becoming a Navy SEAL, right? He made every decision based on what he wanted to accomplish with his life. And I'm not saying he didn't get in trouble, because he was not perfect, trust me. We had a lot of moments that started with a phrase, something like, "Hey, y'all, watch this." And then it ended poorly, but we had lots of that, and we had, I'm not saying he was an angel, he wasn't perfect, it's not like that. It's just he was a good person, and he had goals, and he made all of his decisions based on his goals. So he gets to his senior year of high school, and it's the Thursday before the first Friday night game of his senior year, and Erin is a really good football player. He's playing both sides of the line, the only guy on the entire team playing both sides of the line. He's a wide receiver and a defensive end. And so they're out there on Thursday's practice before his senior season. He's getting scouted by colleges, and he's actually thinking about playing a couple years of football in small colleges, not big ones. I don't want to misrepresent that at all. But he's getting scouted by several small colleges that want him to come play. And so that Thursday, I pull up to the field to watch practice, as I often did, and I see all the coaches huddled around one player writhing in pain on the ground. And they said, "Mrs. Vaughn, get out here. It's Erin. He's torn up his knee." So long story short, after all the x-rays and MRIs and all that were done, we found out that he had obliterated the anterior cruciate ligament in his left knee and torn all the other ligaments and done a great deal of damage. So you know what? It was a setback, but it was going to be fine because we knew he could have surgery, get it repaired, everything would be on the mend, we'd move forward, he would move forward. So he did. He had surgery, he had a new ACL put in, and at 6'4" tall, he worked so hard that within 6 months he was running a 4.40. And if any of you are athletes in this room, you know how impressive that is for a guy who's 6'4" tall. He worked hard to get back to this dream. Now we're just a few weeks before he's graduating high school. He graduated at 17 years old. We're just a few weeks out, and he's playing a pickup game of basketball with some of his friends after school. Comes down wrong on that leg, and he blows his knee out again. We get in for the test, and we find out that sure enough, he's obliterated the ACL again. He's torn the other ligaments. There's damage. They don't know how much it is. They go into surgery, and we think it's a major setback. His heart's broken, He knows there's not going to be any college ball now. He's going to get this thing fixed, and he's going to get in the SEAL Challenge program. That's all that ever mattered anyway. Unfortunately, about 2 hours into the procedure, the surgeon comes out and sits down in the waiting room with my husband Billy and I, and he says, "Mr. and Mrs. Vaughn, I have some really bad news." He said, "Erin's knee is too damaged to repair. There's actually nothing we can do to fix it." He said, "There's no bone left in his knee to attach a new anterior cruciate ligament to. It's just mush in there." I can't remember all the words he used, but he just basically explained it as demolished. And then he said these words I'll never forget. He said, "Erin is going to spend the rest of his life somewhat handicapped, and he will never do anything physical again without the use of a special brace." Well, when Erin woke up from that anesthesia, he literally thought his life was over. Everything he'd ever planned, every dream he'd ever had, everything he challenged himself to accomplish, to be, to do, physically, mentally, everything, it was over. And he had a hard time. He had a really hard time. Went into what I'd call a pretty severe depression, just couldn't understand what was going on, just couldn't fathom what had just happened. And so he didn't know what else to do. He graduated high school. He didn't have a clue what to do. He'd never made any other plans. So he gets a job at a prestigious golf course. He lands a job at a really nice golf course down in South Florida where we live. And they liked him so much, because he just, like I told you, he's that funny kid who's always positive, can do. He'd make you think you could do anything. If he could do it, you could too, and you could do more than he could. That's just who he was, a tremendous encourager. So they loved him. They put him all the way through college. So now he's got a college career in golf course management, a lucrative career in front of him. He's being scouted by some serious golf courses. He's becoming a golf pro. He's being scouted by some serious golf courses in the Carolinas who just love him. He's gone and had some meetings, and he's thinking about which job opportunity he's going to take. And then the unthinkable happened. 9/11. How many of you were alive on 9/11? How many of you have studied it even though you were babies, or you know? I just want to take you through something really quick here. We found out later that it was not the planes that hit the Twin Towers that day that caused Erin to do what he did next. As horrific as that was, you've seen the images, right? As young as you are, you know what it was like that day. No air traffic in our entire country. You guys, your generation, you don't even know what it's like to really be free. Everything's been different since we were struck by terrorists on 9/11. Everything is different. But it wasn't the Twin Towers. It wasn't the people jumping from those towers that day. Do you remember the images? And I always in my mind picture, iconically to me, it's stuck in my memory, is the woman who holds her skirt down as she steps out that window, like a final act of dignity, holding her skirt down as she plunges to her death. Horrific. Soot-stained, bloody faces running through Manhattan with those huge clouds of debris and bodies and just billowing after them. We remember those images, but that's not what caused them to do it. It wasn't the plane that struck the Pentagon. And I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this. I know you probably have. People who have served, you get this. But for a person who's got a heart to protect his country, the strike on the Pentagon was a sucker punch to our nation's defense. It was one of those moments where if somebody spits in your face on the playground, you know what I mean? Like it was we're going to strike the center of your nation's defense. So it was horrific for people with a heart that says, I'm serving, I'm protecting my country, I'm going to take that place in history and do my part fighting for my nation. But that's not what caused him to do what he did next. What caused Erin Vaughn to do what he did next were the 40 average citizens on board Flight 93. You remember them? They got on that plane that morning with their little roller bags. They put their briefcases and their purses and under the seat, and they put their roller bags overhead, and they sat down and they listened to somebody instruct them on how to buckle a seatbelt, just like we do every time we fly. You know, it was just a typical morning. They kissed their families goodbye. Maybe like me, they were just going to go to Louisiana. They'd be right back. Hey, we're having dinner on Tuesday night when I get back, right? You know, everybody thought it was just like any other day, except it wasn't. And those 40 people stood up on their aircraft, and they took their place in history. They realized it was one of those moments, if not now, when? And if not me, who? And they did what they had to do, and they thwarted what possibly would have been the worst attack on our nation's soil that day. They stopped it, and they were obliterated in a cornfield in Pennsylvania. But in the following days, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, if you haven't heard it, look it up, Google it. In the following days, recorded phone calls started leaking to the press of those people on that plane talking to their loved ones and telling their wives, if I don't make it, tell the kids I love them. Tell my mom, I'm sorry. And then finally came 2 words out of a young father named Todd Beamer that literally shifted the heart of our entire nation. Does anybody in this room know what he said? 2 words. Let's roll. It was a war cry. We found out later that that's what caused Erin to do what he did next. Because there it was, the indomitable spirit of every patriot whose bloodstained boots have paved the pathway to our freedom. Let's roll. Again, if not me, who? And if not now, when, right? Erin came home a couple months later on his 21st birthday. And he sat down at the table across from his father and I, and he said, Mom and Dad, I stopped by the Navy recruiter's office on the way home from work, and I joined the SEAL Challenge program. And his father, I don't know how many of you have encouraging fathers. Erin did not. His father's first words, because it was quite a few seconds of silence. Nobody knew what to say. Because remember, before I get to what Billy said, I'm thinking, all this time that Erin wanted to be a Navy SEAL, we weren't at war. Erin? It was just going to be this really cool job, this thing he could tell his kids he did one day. We weren't at war, but now he's saying this, we're at war and people are dying. And he's telling me he's going to go do this. And so it was completely different. And I was pretty dumbfounded. But Billy, being dad and being exactly who he is, first thing out of his mouth is, well, you'll never make it. What about your knee? And he said, Dad, this part always gets me choked up because I'll never forget it. He said, Dad, I have always known who I am. I have always known that I'm going to do this. I feel like God is telling me right now to go do it. And if he is, I'm going to make it. Make a very long story short, BUDS, which we read that in your bio, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. BUDS Class 248 started with 157 men and 7 finished, and he was one of them. Not only that, there's a wall in Coronado Island that holds the names of the men. It reads first time every time. It holds the names of a few men in history who complete every single evolution required of them the first time they try it. He got on that wall. And it made no sense. And he couldn't even tape his knee because it would have given away his secret. What he had done, we found out later, is he had started this, we didn't even know it, but in the months following 9/11, he had started this physical training where he developed muscle bands around his knee that would stabilize the joint without the ACL being there. And he hurt every day. He hurt every day, but his pain wasn't important to him. What was important was living his dream. One thing his coaches always said about Erin was he played bigger than his size. I don't know if any of you can appreciate this because you all look like healthy guys in here, you know, strong and filled out. And he was by the time he was your age too. But, you know, he was the kid that when he was defensive end of the season, he weighed 160 pounds and he was 6'4" tall, size 13.5 foot, and he literally tripped over his own feet everywhere he went. He was awkward and clumsy. He was a tenacious and aggressive football player, but he did not look like a person who was going to be a Navy SEAL. And so I just say to you, always play bigger than your size. And that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today, but I just want to say it even to the adults in this room. Play bigger than your size. That's how you leave a legacy. That's how you change the course of history through you being here. That's not what I came to talk to you about today. So Erin goes on through his military career, and he literally is the happiest person. I mean, I never knew a person more satisfied and more gratified by what they got to do. And every single time we would talk, even when he made it all the way to SEAL Team 6, he never once beat his chest and said, look what I did. Never. He was the most humble human being. He would always say, listen to me, he would always say, I can't believe God let me do this. That was his heart. I can't believe I got to do this. You know why? Because he loved his country. He believed that a representative republic is the noblest form of government ever devised by man, and he knew it was worth dying for. And here's what I say to people all the time. You know, we've had our horrific moments in our history. We have. We've had embarrassing moments, moments that make me want to vomit thinking about it. But because of freedom, we've always been able to correct it. Because of freedom, you're free to stand up and fix what you see is wrong. Because of freedom, you're free. We're free to stand up and be that voice that says, no more. No more. This isn't the way future's going to be after I'm here. I'm changing this. Because we're free. And we're free because of those who offer their lives for us. Generation after generation, ours is the only national anthem that ends with a question mark. And every generation, people have had to step up and say, I'll answer the question. Yeah, we're going to be free when I leave here. I spend my life now praying that God gives me the ability to shift the course of nature, the course of our country's future in a way that my grandchildren will know more freedom than I knew, not less. I don't ever want them to look at me and say, Grandma, I have 6 grandchildren. I don't ever want the day to come where they look at me and say, what were you doing when it all went wrong? We got problems, right? But because of freedom, we can fix them. And we get freedom because of the day we're honoring today, Veterans Day. We get freedom because generation after generation, young men and young women have run to recruiters' offices across this nation, and they've signed up, and they have been willing to pay the ultimate price to protect us, to protect the American dream. And you know what I say to people all the time? I'm gonna tell this, and I'm gonna do one more story with the next slide. If you put that next slide up. Here's the thing. If you think, can y'all, I'm gonna get in the light so you can see my face. If you think our best days are behind us as a nation, turn your television off. Just turn it off and get off social media for a little bit, because here's the thing. We are not the people we're being told we are on the news. We're not. We're not those people. I travel all over this country, and the love for each other across this nation. If you forget what America's like, pick up a ticket to a Friday night high school football game. You're going to see what America looks like. You're going to see what it looks like to be free in the greatest nation on earth. If that doesn't do it for you, drive by a park on a Saturday and watch families freely playing, doing whatever they want to do. Or next time you're having a backyard barbecue with your family, with your friends, or you're having a frat party or whatever you do at your crazy little age, do me a favor. Just back up away from it all and look around. What do y'all do? You got like looks on your face like, she knows something. No, just back up away from it all and just think for a minute how fortunate you are to live in America. Everywhere I look, I see the reason you fought. I see the reason each one of you who stood up fought, and I see the reason Aaron gave his life. Everywhere I look. And I'm thankful for my country. I'm so thankful that I get to live in freedom. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is this slide right here. Okay. This is Brad Kavner in a truck with Erin. Brad's closest to me. That truck is called the Big Dirty. They built it from the ground up, and they had about $35,000 in that piece of crap when Erin died. I mean, it's literally, and look at their faces. They're both looking like, yeah, we just spent that on it. I mean, they both look guilty every time they're in it, because everybody was like, what are you doing? But year after year, they just poured more money in it. Erin and Brad were very best friends. It literally crushed Brad Kavner when Erin Vaughn died. I mean, crushed him. They were teammates. They lived together out in Coronado Island until Erin got married. They were, most of their careers, they lived together in a house. And I mean, everybody, that house is historic now, if you know what I mean. Like everybody in Coronado knows 454D, you know. But they were just best friends and brothers in every sense of the word, except come from the same mother. Brothers in every sense of the word otherwise. And so what I want to end today talking to you about is Erin's funeral. August 26, 2011. As you heard in my bio, I don't know if you paid attention, but Erin died in a massive loss of life, a mass casualty. The shoot down of Extortion 17, 30 Americans died that were on board that chopper that day. Everybody that was on it died. So at Arlington on August 26, 2011, 13 of the men were buried together. Their families chose to have them buried in the same place on the same day. So it was a mass funeral. A whole Navy ship was emptied out behind the caskets. There were thousands of people there. The procession from the chapel to the gravesite was 1 mile long. Thousands upon thousands of people. It was a hot, humid day, just almost unbearable to be outside. And I'm just trying to set the setting for you so you kind of get where I was that day. And it's the most unbearable thing to go through anyway. When you turn a corner and you see 13 flag-draped caskets in a row of young men who were at the prime of their life, it's almost more than you can take, much less one of them is your boy. And so here we are, we're at this funeral service, and we're all in the families are put under tents, and everybody else is standing around outside of it. And we go through the whole ceremony, the folded flag, all that stuff. You know, they hand the mothers the folded flag, they hand the wives the folded flag. And all of that is finally over. The services are held at each casket because there were several men with different faiths, like somebody right beside Erin was a Hindu, and his family was having their religious service there, and we were having our religious service here, and you know, on and on it went through the 13 caskets. Well, when when that was finally over, they were trying to rush all the families to get back on a plane to go to Virginia Beach because, believe it or not, a freaking hurricane was coming to Virginia Beach, and they were trying to get us back there because we were all staying in oceanfront hotels, right? And they had flown us over to Arlington that day and were trying to get us back before the storm hit. And yes, we rode out a Category 3 hurricane on the 6th floor of an oceanfront hotel the day after we buried our son. It was great. Yeah. So anyway, back to Arlington. So we're there, and it finally comes time. They're trying to get everybody to leave. And so we're literally, standing at the casket. The hardest first step a mother will ever make in her life is the first step you take away from your son, the last time you're ever going to be in the presence of your child's body on earth, right? And so they're pressing us, and finally I'm like, all right. And so we start to walk off. And then something happened that I knew was coming, but I had forgotten about it in all the emotional stuff. And it was the Trident Ceremony. I heard somebody pound a trident into Erin's coffin. How many of you know what a trident is? So if you just stand up and show him real quick. He has a small trident on. The actual trident is much larger than that, but not really appropriate to wear on a suit lapel, right? It's pretty big. It's an eagle holding an anchor and a pistol, and it's got all sorts of symbolism in it. But they start a Trident Ceremony, and what they do is each man, when they become a Navy SEAL, when they earn that trident, it's pounded into their flesh. It's got 4 prongs on the back of it, and they pound it right into their flesh. So in honor of a fallen brother, when someone dies, the SEALs line up at their coffin, and one by one they take the trident off of their uniform, they put it on their brother's coffin, and they pound it into their coffin as it was pounded into their chest, and their brother gets buried with tridents all up and down his coffin, a symbolism of honor and respect. So I heard the first trident get pounded into the coffin. They weren't leaving until that was done. His brothers weren't leaving until they did that ceremony. I whipped around, and I had heard Erin talk about this ceremony so many times. It was like overwhelming now that it was happening on my boy's coffin. I'm sorry. And so I walked back over. I was like, forget the hurricane, forget the flight. I'll stay in D.C. I don't care. I'm going to be here for this. I'm going to be present for this. So I walked back over, and I'm here, and his coffin's laying in front of me, and his head would be here and his feet here, and the SEALs are lined up this way, right about his chest level, and they're coming one at a time and putting him down the coffin. And then it finally came Brad's turn. If you put that, just leave that picture up of Brad if you don't mind. It finally came Brad's turn. And everybody was watching because they knew how broken Brad was, losing Erin. And so he comes up, and he is literally shaking so bad that he can barely fumble and get the trident off of his uniform. But he finally gets it off, and he kneels down on one knee, and his hands are just shaking violently. And he puts the trident down, and he hits it, and because he's shaking so hard, it flips off into the dirt. And I sense that it embarrassed him. I don't know if that makes sense. I just sense that he just put his head down, and it looked like he was just humiliated that he had failed at that one last thing, right? That's just the feeling I got. And so I thought, I know I'm not supposed to pick it up for him. He has to get up and do this himself. And so he did. He finally composed himself. He pressed himself up off the casket. He walked around, and he got the trident, and he came back around, and he got down on one knee, and that boy took a deep breath and steadied himself. And he put that trident down, and nothing was shaking. And he hit it so hard that it sounded like a shotgun went off across Arlington National Cemetery. And everybody who was walking off flipped around to see what had happened. It was so loud, it just sent a shiver down your spine. And then Brad Kavner, he did the unthinkable. He laid his head down on my son's chest, and he cried like a baby. And I remember watching him thinking, I want to comfort him, but this is just something he's got to get through, right? He's just got to do this. And so he finally got done grieving, and he lifted his head up. He never made eye contact with any of us. He just stood up, lifted his head up, but kept his eyes down, and he walked back to the back of the line, and it was over. And I tell you that story because 3 years later, we all came back to Arlington to bury Brad. Here's why I tell you that. The sacrifice for your freedom has been tremendous. It has cost people so much through the ages. And what I want to do is compel you to live a life worthy of that kind of sacrifice, to grab the gift of freedom, the gift that you have to be and do, accomplish anything you're gifted to do, be, or accomplish, and understand that everybody doesn't get these chances. Everybody doesn't get a chance to grow old. Everybody doesn't get a chance to have freedom, and you have it because of men like Erin, Vaughn, and Brad Kavner, who gave up everything for your futures, for your right nows. Because of men like this and every other person who stood and served our country, you have the right here to dream, to achieve, to accomplish because of freedom. So treat it with the respect it deserves. Thank you guys so much for listening to me. I really do appreciate you. God bless you.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn, for sharing Erin's story and for reinforcing the reality of so many who've paid the ultimate price for our freedom. We should all be encouraged to live lives worthy of what's been given on our behalf. I would also ask that you all pause for a moment to think of those currently standing watch across the globe. Thank you for attending the program today, which has been sponsored by the NSU President's Leadership Program and Alpha Lambda Delta Honor Society. God bless you all, bless our veterans, and bless the United States of America. Thank you.